Thank you, Jacqueline. Hey, everyone, welcome. Very excited to talk to you today. I think we have very good content to share, a little bit for everyone. We don't know who is attending, if you are in the security world, or if you're a manager, or if you're InfoSec, but I think there is a little bit of everything for everybody. The title of the session is Protect, Detect, and Respond to Malicious OAuth Applications Abusing Cloud Email Services. I know that's a mouthful, but the idea is really to dive into one of these attacks that we have been seeing in the wild, and Tal is going to talk a little bit more about that in the following slides. And before we get any further, let's just do a quick intro. Myself, Douglas Santos, I'm a senior product manager in the Defender for Cloud Apps product team. And my day-to-day job is to get insights from customers and work with amazing customers and help them deploy and get real value of the product itself. Tal?
I'm Tal. I lead the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps and Microsoft Defender for Office research team. And I'm happy to be here.
All right, the agenda for today is very straightforward. We're going to talk about this particular attack that we've been seeing in the wild, how the bad actor operates. So Tal is going to walk us through specific details of this particular attack. And then later we'll talk about how Microsoft 365 Defender can be used to protect, detect, and respond. And at the end, we'll do a little demo of some of the detections and alerts that are available within our platform. And if time permits, we're going to have some time for Q&A, but I have a great team. Appreciate so much my team to be here with us. And if you have questions, put the question in the chat and we'll try to answer them as we go as well.
All right, with no further ado, we'll start the discussion around the financially motivated attackers, and mention that in the last year or so, we've been seeing a significant increase in the volume of attacks, complexity and volume. So we've collected the four main attack scenarios that are relevant, where the first one, the email service is a spam platform, will be our main subject for today. But for giving some wider context on other financially type of attacks, so consent phishing, business email compromise, and crypto mining are happening as well. And we've tagged here some blog posts that we've recently published to tell more about those. And as mentioned, email service is a spam platform. We're going to hit this type of campaign and get into the bottom of how attackers are using and leveraging this campaign. Okay, so what is really happening in this area of email service and spam as a platform? The attacker's goal here with this type of campaign is to spread phishing, fraud, scam emails in very, very large scale, leveraging legitimate organizations in order to wash and get avoid of being detected of those emails. So in this timeline, we're seeing a typical timeline of a random organization that has been attacked this summer. And what we're seeing in those organizations is that usually it's an admin account, user account of an admin without anything, and being attacked first, being compromised. And that user is being leveraged to create a line of business type of application, add some permissions to that applications, and wait. Wait can be even 6 months for the right time for the attacker to come back to this organization and leverage the application that was created in order to set some further configurations on the Exchange Online service. And those configurations will help the actor to pipe those emails from another email service through the victim's Exchange Online, and then be able to avoid being detected and send many emails for different victims around the world. So with that, we can kind of summarize this into a kill chain that we will start reviewing and get into details of each of those. So as mentioned, in the initial access is usually a password spray and defense aviation. The second stage is usually installing a line of business type of application in the victim organization, and then setting some Exchange Online inbound connector transport rules. We'll double click on each of those actions and activities, and at last send those emails, and even remove once the actor is finishing with the activities. It can of sending emails. It could be maybe 30 or 60 days of sending emails. They will try to remove the transport rules and kind of clean up the Exchange Online configurations, but still have some backdoor using the LOB application. So what we're seeing in terms of the initial access. So the actor seems to become from a private server, a virtual private server that they own, and perform first the password spraying and the credential guessing against thousands of users. Based on the success ratio, we understand that the actor actually have good dump of credentials already, because most of the logins are successful. Credentials are validated every some time. Once the actor has gained credentials, they are testing the validity of those using Azure Active Directory PowerShell client, just checking if the login still works. So they have kind of an inventory of credentials that are valid and can be used. And then very typical is that no MFA was set to those compromised users. And we'll talk about this in the second part of the webinar. So regarding defense aviation in more detail, backdoor with OAuth application, how an OAuth application can become a backdoor. So once the actor decides to come back to and use this or set the application first, they register an application with a specific naming convention, and then they add specific credentials, Exchange manage as app type of credentials. Those are legacy credentials that are not accessible through the UI, but they have to set it through the manifest. They grant admin consent permissions to that specific application. So because the permissions are requested and needed, this type of grant. And then they also grant, in addition to the consent type of permissions, they are also adding the application to some further administrative roles. And at last, they add credentials. So the application becomes a new identity in the victim organization and can be used when needed. The second part is when the attacker or the actor gets back to the organization and wants to modify the Exchange settings and start spreading emails out of those out of this Exchange Online environment. So they log in using the service principal of the application, the identity of the application, from Exchange from PowerShell with Exchange model working to perform configuration modification on the Exchange server or service. It's an Exchange Online, so it's a service, and mainly do two type of configurations: the Exchange Online inbound connector and Exchange Online transport rules. So regarding the inbound connector, the attacker will set another new inbound connector, which allows transferring the emails from another third-party email service through the victim organization. So the IPs are being washed. Their original email service is hidden. Is kind of and kind of have a new set of proxy to spread emails. The right side of the slide, we can see how an audit log can be leveraged to find out on a new connector that was set in the organization. It also has some sort of naming convention that was set for this actor. And you can see what are the original IPs. It's here. It's we had to remove it, but it can be found here. Where is the sender coming from? So once the connector is set, okay, the connector will also use transport rules to remove headers, important headers, out of the emails that go through this proxy. And those emails are usually used to detect spam emails or fraud emails that are being sent. So they have a list of at least 12 headers that they typically remove from all emails that are going through the connector. And also here they use some sort of naming convention and specific list of headers that have been removed. One example is the anti-spam type of header and received type of header that kind of collect all the previous recipients and senders that the email have been seen along its path to the final target. So those are being removed and washed. And last, just one example of how what type of emails are being sent. So it's a typical phishing that once you click the button and take a survey or make any action, it kind of leads the victim into setting any connection with the actor's platform, and then the attacker would try to tweak the victim to pay. It could be for a free phone or a free service, or get some a present back. As long as the actor gets the credit card, they are just paying some $30 to $200 for each victim. It's the end goal of this attack. All right, so few midway takeaways. So I mentioned that the actor is using a naming convention that can definitely be changed a long time. So as long as it works out okay, but don't build the detection only on top of the naming convention. As mentioned, multi-factor authentication for this type of attack is critical, very, very critical. And then if by any chance your organization has been attacked, then the first thing to do is force MFA in the organization in general, and then force reauthenticate and password reset for the compromised users, and then remove all the line of business application, transport rules, and inbound connectors. We set some links here with more details on each of the steps that are recommended first as the first remediation. With that, Douglas, back to you.
All right, let me just reshare real quick. You can see that, right? Okay.
Yeah, yes, I can see that.
Let me know if there's any issues. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how to protect, detect, and respond to this particular type of attack, but also more generically with Defender, Microsoft 365 Defender. So the first thing, and Tal talked about this in the beginning, it's important to realize the complexity that we have today in this, the new world. Everyone is fighting for complex and challenging environments with all the tools that they have. Bad actors are getting more creative in launching these sophisticated attacks, right? There are many great security tools out there, but most of them don't really talk to each other. They don't share signals, so it's very hard to make sense of the noise that's out there. And one thing that we hear all the time is that alert fatigue is a real problem, especially for those frontline security incident responders. Now, how we can help? Let's talk about Microsoft security for a second and how our security solutions can help you protect, detect, and respond to these type of attacks. Our approach to security is really to reach out and have a lot of breadth, and also go very deep into each problem and have best of breed solutions that can help solve these complex situations. One thing to note is that our breadth is, the breadth approach is delivered with the Microsoft Sentinel that sits on the top of this, this picture, which is our cloud native SIEM and SOAR solution. SIEM is a security information event management system, and SOAR is where you see all the orchestration, automation, and response on top of your security tools. So in this case, I think it's important to highlight a couple of things and where Microsoft Sentinel is very helpful in this particular situation. Not only it's one of the best SIEM solutions out there with all of the intelligence, automation, and threat intelligence that can feed into Microsoft Sentinel, but if you think about it, and Tal mentioned something very important, that this particular actor, they sit and they wait. They don't compromise and attack, right? They sit and they wait months. And I think one of the reasons that they want to try to evade detections, because most of the logs, depending on where you look at, they're going to be retained for like 30 days, 90 days. Alerts in our platform, you get them for 6 months. But after that, if you're not using a SIEM to get this to a different database, then you start losing the ability to investigate in the past, right? So log retention is super important. The automation piece that comes with that is super important as well, because you can automate a lot of the remediations and mitigations that I'm going to talk about. And finally, important to note as well is that if you want to look beyond the cloud and for things like that are happening on-prem, maybe you have an on-prem Exchange server that you want to collect logs from and investigate if there's something going on there as well, or firewall logs. That's where Sentinel is super helpful. On the bottom, you're going to see the Microsoft 365 Defender, which is a suite of security products to help defend secure users' identities and endpoints. And on the right side, you see Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is our Defender solution for securing your cloud infrastructure. I'm going to dive into, at least at a high level, into the Microsoft 365 Defender and some of the things that we can do to help you there. So although the attack techniques that we're discussing in this webinar are very specific, I cannot emphasize enough that the bad actors, they're always changing, they're morphing, they're changing the way they are operating, so they evade detections, right? So as Tal mentioned, the attack starts with compromising an admin credential, and then they register an app, and the app is used to quote unquote impersonate that admin and do more damage in the environment. But what if this attack had originated from an on-prem identity, right? Or what if it was the admin workstation that was compromised and not the credentials themselves, right? So it's important to think about how to protect your on-prem and cloud identities, how to protect your endpoints and IoT, how to protect your email and collaboration tools, as well as your SaaS applications and your identities. And that's where we really shine with the Microsoft 365 Defender suite of tools, because we can provide you an end-to-end security across all of this state. Again, I'll go back to the topic of the day, which is the attack that is leveraging apps to basically create inbound rules in Exchange, and see how some of the specific tools that we have here in the portfolio can help with that. Starting with Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, which is almost like a Swiss Army knife of security capabilities. It has so many capabilities from detecting shadow IT activity to protecting SaaS applications in your environment, have great information protection and DLP capabilities. And the list goes on and on. SaaS protection with the SSPM. But what I want to call out today is the threat protection capabilities of Defender for Cloud Apps. You can see here a lot of detections that we have that are built in with the product, but just calling out a few that are very specific to the attack that we're seeing with OAuth applications. So when you look at alerts or detections that we made available through Defender for Cloud Apps that are looking for a malicious OAuth application or multiple failed login attempts to an app, to to unusual addition of credentials to an OAuth app, all those things are indicators that something wrong is happening in your environment. And then when you pivot over to the identity itself, there's so many great detections that provides not only alerts, but also great insights to what's going on in your organization. And when you bring that back into the Microsoft 365 Defender, this is a gold piece of information that we can leverage to automatically generate those alerts and those detections that will notify our customers when something are malicious or abnormal is going on with their environment. And finally, that I'll say about this is that we also have great UEBA capabilities with Defender for Cloud Apps that detects abnormal behavior for users that are downloading an amount of data that they don't usually download normally, or users that are logging in from infrequent locations, infrequent country, or even situations where impossible travel is at stake, right? The user just logged in from the US, and then 5 minutes later you see a session from China, which is usually not normal, right? So there are a ton of capabilities that we can talk about and spend the whole day talking about Defender for Cloud Apps, but I wanted to call out a few more things that's important as well. And one of them is a solution called App Governance that runs with Defender for Cloud Apps that helps you to detect specific behaviors on the app side of the house. So Defender for Cloud Apps is great to detect user behavior and some application behavior as well. But if you want to look deeper into those app registrations that are happening in Azure AD and what they're doing, what they're accessing, what kind of permissions they have, App Governance is great for that. And just to emphasize what we've been talking about with the increase in these types of attacks, where we see app-based attacks being leveraged, mostly because we're getting very good at detecting credential types of attack, right? And the admin account is compromised, and then usually in the past, what the bad actor will do is create another admin account, so you don't call the attention to the original account that was compromised. And now they're pivoting into compromising applications, OAuth applications that can impersonate an identity and do kind of the same things that the admin will do, like creating exchange transport rules and inbound connectors and things like that. So there are some examples in here that you can read and understand some from 2019 to 2020 to 2022. Some of these examples of applications being leveraged to compromise environments. And I think most of you are very well familiar with especially the business email compromise, because that's a very known, and we actually have been tracking some groups that are very specialized in that particular type of attack. What we're talking about here today is a different ballgame. They're not interested in compromising, not necessarily your end user. They're using your infrastructure to compromise others. And the other piece of the equation is Azure Active Directory identity protection. So Tal mentioned that MFA is super critical, but beyond MFA, having a good security solution to protect the identities, to have enhanced login of the all of the activity, both from the user and the apps and service principals and managed identities, having the ability to have a built-in solution to detect threat alerts in your environment with the identity focus, The other thing that identity protection does is to track the users and give each user a risk score that's dynamic depending on what's going on with the user life cycle. And then you have also sign-in reports and the ability to see the privileged access insights. And I'll talk a little bit more in a couple of slides of some things that you can do to leverage these capabilities and mitigate some of the threats that are imposed with this type of attack. But before I go there, I just want to point out to the better together story, right? When you put together app governance and Defender for Cloud Apps and Azure Active Directory, you really get the best of all solutions. Solutions that can control app access like Azure Active Directory is super important, but as well as solutions like Defender for Cloud Apps that will put a flashlight on the threat that's going on to your environment, and app governance, closing the loop, basically giving you visibility on the API level of what these apps are doing in your environment, what kind of permissions they have, like I said, and if they're suspicious, if they have been signed or not, who is consenting to those apps, is it an admin consent, is it a user consent? So all of that information is super critical, and there's very powerful policies that you can put in place and create your own policy. There's some that are built-in, but you can also create your own to start detecting this type of threats and more that probably are to come. So let me just pause here because the next slide is a little busy. And I just want to set the stage that with all that said, right, the main message that I want you to drive home is Defender for Cloud Apps is in particular is the main security solution that is providing most of the telemetry that we need to detect the attack that we're talking about here. But because of the power of Microsoft 365 Defender, where we are doing that threat intel and that alert correlation and basically connecting the dots on your behalf, we are able to see from multiple sources, from multiple security solutions within the Microsoft 365 Defender what's going on. And with that, we can generate high fidelity alerts that you can act on. So just to explain a little bit about this slide, so we're basically taking the attack and mapping it to, on the left side, to the MITRE attack ID framework. And on the right side, you see where we have products like Defender for Office with built-in capabilities like safe attachments, safe links, great anti-phishing and anti-spam capabilities that can detect and protect before the admin account is compromised or a user, for that sake, is compromised. As well as Defender for Cloud Apps in here talking about the suspicious password spray related IP activity. Some of these, we're going to publish this deck later on together with the webinar. So you have clickable links in here where we have written playbooks that you can go to and understand what to do if you fall in a situation like you're seeing suspicious password spray, or if you're seeing suspicious activity from an IP, or you're seeing a suspicious app, Azure AD app creation. So how do I respond to that? Where do I go to? How do I know if that app is supposed to be granted those types of permissions or not? And then you see the list goes on and on. I'm not going to go explain every one of those because it's a lot, but just rest assured that these are all detections that we have today available for Microsoft 365 Defender customers. And if you see one of these, make sure you pay attention, right? Because the chances are that there's something bad happening in your environment. And just to call out as well at the end here, the Microsoft 365 Defender acting as the connecting tissue for all of the security solutions. For this particular attack, we're talking about Defender for Cloud Apps, we're talking about app governance, we're talking about Defender for Office, and Azure ID identity protection. So they are working as a seamless XDR solution on the back end and are working for you to provide you, like I said, with high fidelity alerts and making sure that you have visibility on what's going on. Now, let me change gears a little bit and talk about some of the recommended mitigations to prevent this from happening in the first place. So in regards to initial access, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to take good care of the credentials and protect the credentials with MFA. I just pulled this, I think it was this week. Some of this was from last week because this blog is from January 26th from our identity team. Only 28% of the users that we measured on the last month were using MFA, which means that the rest are not using MFA. And more critical, in my opinion, is this other blog post here that talks about specifically metrics that we have around Azure AD admin roles. 2/3 of them are not using MFA. To be more precise, the number that I saw is like 34% of the admins are using MFA. The rest is not. So it's a very tough problem. If the admin account is compromised and you don't put MFA, or if you're and by the way, there are some of these accounts that are that have been compromised, and the admins haven't even changed the password. Like Tal said, the bad actor keeps pinging the credential and the password to see if it's still live, if they can still use it. So no matter if you remediate and remove the app and remove the permissions and undo all the settings in Exchange and all the settings in your transport rules, if you don't solve the main problem, which is the initial access, the bad actor will come back in and continue to do this and much more, right? This is just one example of many that we could give here of bad things that could happen when an admin credential is compromised. So MFA. With that said, you can take that for customers that we consider to have complex environments. These are typical enterprise customers that use conditional access. MFA for all of the admins and hopefully for all of the users. But don't stop there, right? Implement privileged identity management. Require those admin accounts to require just-in-time elevation. No standing access to those accounts. Step up the game with phish-resistant MFA. That's a very hot topic right now. I highly recommend you reading on it, and especially for admins, to use a phish-resistant MFA so that MFA token or code or whatever you're using, it can't be spoofed, it can't be compromised. Go passwordless. Another hot topic that we're pushing not only enterprise customers, but also consumer to go passwordless and avoid having the problem with the password in the first place. And use Azure AD identity protection. It's very powerful in detecting signing risks and risky users in your environment. And finally, continuous access evaluation is a new capability that allows you to revoke the token in real time, and instead of waiting for the token to expire. So use it whenever you can, right? If you're not in this bucket of a complex environment, if you're a smaller organization or you don't use conditional access, make sure you turn on security defaults in Azure Active Directory. That will take care of most of these items for you, and like require MFA and disabling legacy authentication and more. If you start or continue, if you have started on your Zero Trust journey, we have excellent material to help customers assess their maturity level and progress on that journey. Train your users. We have great resources on the Defender for Office 365 to do attack simulations inside the organization. And finally, use Microsoft 365 Defender SIEM and XDR to stop those attacks in the first place. Another type of mitigation that I recommend is when you're not sure about those apps, make sure that you have a strong system or a framework to approve to do app consent at an admin level, and also to approve user consent. Set your policy for user consent to a minimum only consent from verified publishers. So we have a program that developers can register and they certify the apps, and then we can tell the tenant that, okay, this is a certified app versus an app that's just came out of the random. And regularly audit the apps and app permissions that you have in your environment. App governance, which I mentioned before, is a great place to do that. But you can also export all your apps in Azure AD with this PowerShell, and then that will list all the permissions that those apps have. And then you can look for specific keywords that may indicate that you have apps that are overprivileged, or apps that are in the situation that we're talking about have permissions to change your Exchange environment. Use Azure AD Access Review to regularly review the members of the admin group, especially the global admin, the cloud application administrator, and the application administrator, because all these groups have the permission to grant consent on behalf of the tenant. And like I said, app governance is a great asset to help detect, alert, and respond to suspicious apps with the built-in threat detections that we have with the product. So just to close on those recommendations, two key takeaways from a configuration perspective. If you have Microsoft 365 Defender, by the way, if you have one Microsoft security, like the Defender for cloud apps, or a Defender for endpoint, or Defender for identity, or Defender for Office, you have Microsoft 365 Defender, right? The 365 Defender is the web that runs on the back scenes of all of the Defender products. So make sure that you turn on the app connector for Office 365 on the Microsoft Defender for Cloud App side, and also that you are ingesting the alerts from the Azure AD Identity Protection Service. With those two things, we can help you with the rest. With that said, back to you, Tal.
Thank you. Let's talk about the M365 Defender investigation experience, specifically for this type of campaign. All right, so in the Microsoft Defender 365, you might see an incident, multi-stage incident involving initial access and some further activities and alerts on the Exchange Online configurations. So as referring to Douglas' slide with the relevant alerts, if you see any of those alerts on suspicious pattern of inbound connector, suspicious inbound connector and transport rule, or new transport rule removing anti-spam headers, those are really good signals to say to pause and take a deeper look on the impacted assets. For example, the user that has been compromised, the application that has been used, and let's walk through a few more views of the UI. So if you open the attack story of that incident, you can better see all the timeline of all the alerts and the related users and IPs. So if you open one of the alerts, you can also see the priority, investigation priority for the related user. So and see this red flag that this user has a good reason to investigate, and we'll see in a minute the reason. You can read about the better description that we provide with the alert itself and related activities, and last but very important button here on the right is an opportunity to classify the alert as true positive or false positive or benign. We actually treat those feedbacks quite heavily. Whether you use the portal or use the API to classify alerts, we tend to use those feedbacks and improve if and where needed. So getting into further related activities of that alert also reveals the IP address, the city and ISP of where those activities have been happening or executed from. So it could be still the original user, but this user we know was compromised and therefore it's being impersonated. So it's possible that the IP or ISP or the city is different than the normal usage of that user. So if you go into the user profile, you'd see a few important numbers and widgets here. So on the left side, we have the Azure AD and identity risk level. So as mentioned before, this user has been tagged as high. And high tagged user is a very good identity to look for and verify why was the tag so high. And also in investigation priority, my AD is telling us something is happening here, and we should invest and further in learning the activities, all the activities that this account has performed, and start like distinguishing between the genuine activities of the user versus the ones that might come from a different IP, ISP, or location, and suggest that those activities were actually performed by an attacker. MDA helps here with recognizing that impossible travel activity was happening by the user, which also suggests that the same credentials were used from a different place. MDA is improving this type of alert quite intensely, and in order to avoid some proxy or VPNs that might salute this type of alert. But in general, if you see this, especially on an admin, this is a good signal for better like having another investigation on that account. If at the end you're willing to set this user as compromised, then on the right side of the user page, you can see the confirm user as compromised, which allows you to decide what type of actions you manually want to take on that account, whether it's a reset password, disable account, if it's an Azure AD account, or AD account. And then if the UI type of investigation is not sufficient, because there are quite many details in these type of attacks, you're more than like, this is like one of the most critical features in the M365 experience is the advanced hunting, which allows you to deep dive into all the activities in the Cloud App Events table. So if you look at the Cloud App Events table and look for an application role assignment to a service principal, and the specific permissions we've discussed at the beginning, the Exchange Manages App Role ID, you'd find the results down below, which is the app ID and the user that set this application, and even the application name. And a good thing to look for is even typos on the application name, because sometimes the actor is rushed to set the application or makes typos. It's also known as some characteristics of phishing emails. So also here, it can be different of one character in the name, or using a different language or encoded character in the name, which suggests that this application was created by someone that is outside of your organization. The other query that is suggested for this type of attack is looking for what we discussed about the transport rules and the fact that they remove headers, important headers for anti-spam security mechanisms from emails. So with this type of query, you can find that, the middle one, which is also provided in the blog post we published on this type of attack. So even a copy paste would work here. And last one is, if you just want to see like a broader view of all the application that might have any permissions on your Exchange Online service, then the last one is just looking for an update application activity with the first party app ID of Exchange Online. So this will list all the application that might have any type of permissions and may use the API to use those to change configurations. With that, I will get back to Douglas' resources slide.
All right. Yeah, so just a shout out for a few important links here. There's a ton of great links and places you can go to understand more, learn more about Defender for Cloud Apps. The first one is the blog that Tal just talked about, is the one that we document this particular attack and what you have to look for. And down below under hot topics, just a shout out for the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps SaaS security Ask Me Anything, and that's going to be held by our the product owners for Defender for Cloud Apps in February 21st. So if anything, just bookmark the aka.ms/cloud apps AMA. And if you are an enterprise customer and you're interested in joining the Customer Connection Program, you can use the again the link aka.ms/join CCP. This is the community of customers that are coming together to understand what we are developing for the product, what previews that we're running. We have cadence calls with these teams to collect feedback and help improve the product. So it's a great community, great customers participate in this. If you're interested, fill out the survey to join. And with that said, I think we have a few minutes. If you have any questions that were not answered in the Q&A, we can take those.
Hey, Douglas. Hey, Tal. First off, amazing. I already learned so much just by listening to you both. We did have a question around the actual sources that are used to verify publishers for apps. Tal, Douglas, do you have any insight into that one?
I can put a link on, well, probably it's gonna get lost, but that publisher verification process is not something that's done in Defender for Cloud Apps. That's something that's done within the Azure Active Directory team. So there are resources online that shows and explain how developers can register for the program and have their apps be basically trusted within the context of the Azure Active Directory. But I don't know necessarily the step-by-step on how developers can go and do it. But that's very well documented, the process to get it done.
Awesome. That actually was in line with what I was thinking as well. So glad I didn't say the wrong thing. Do you mind sharing the doc when you get a chance, Douglas, and then I'll reply to the person who asked the question. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there was a question on MFA stealing question. Asaf, do you recall which one that is?
Yeah, there was a question about someone read that hackers can compromise MFA. So there are some techniques to steal MFA and to trick users to give you the MFA. But I really want to emphasize these are very rare. Like they can happen, but like all the campaign that was presented now and many others are really counting on customers not having MFA at all. Like it's all automated. It's all scripts running on passwords and detect success, and not dealing with stealing MFA at all. So yeah, like this is the first basic and most important layer of defense here.
Absolutely. I think the numbers we have on that is that NFA, any MFA is better than none, right? That's the first thing. And I think it stops 98 or 99% of the attacks. But like I said in my recommendations there, especially for high privilege accounts, you can step up the MFA by using phish resistant MFA. Those are things like Hello for Business, FIDO2 keys, certificate-based authentication. Those cannot be phished, right? You literally have to compromise the machine and the token and however the admin is logging in to be able to have it all, right? And that takes a lot of effort. I'm not saying that's impossible, but it's almost like, you know, getting someone and basically forcing them into logging in for you, right? The cost of the attack is so high that the bad actor will probably just walk away and try to find someone that's not even using MFA. But that's a great question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're good with questions.
I saw one more, sorry. I was replying to something and also looking. Do we, can we add multiple M365 connectors today, similar to how we can have multiple instances of Salesforce, ServiceNow, etc.? Tal, Douglas, do either of you know the answer to that question?
And I'm assuming that is in context of Defender for Cloud Apps, or maybe that's more generically speaking. I'm not sure.
It sounds like it's more generic, given that they know that they can add other instances.
The solution for that today is Sentinel, because with Sentinel you have the ability to pull in the data, the alerts, and even the raw logs from multiple tenants and consolidate that. Sentinel has a solution for that. If the question is more in line with, I want Defender for Cloud Apps to connect to multiple Office 365 or Microsoft 365, then the answer is no. Today, you have a one-to-one dependency on Defender for Cloud Apps to an Office 365 environment.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Wrap up.
Thank you so much, yes, Douglas and Tal, for today's webinar. Thank you so much to the rest of the team who helped to answer questions as well. We had tons in the chat coming in. And most of all, thanks to all of our attendees for being part of our community and for joining us. Today's webinar will be found in the recording, and slides will be made available at aka.ms/securitycommunity under the videos and webinar recording section. And in case we missed your question today, or if there are additional questions afterwards, you can always ask them on our Microsoft 365 Defender forum at aka.ms/m365dtc. Also would love to remind listeners that the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements is to join our public community at aka.ms/securitycommunity. And lastly, we'd love to hear your feedback on how we can improve the webinars. So please just take a moment to submit your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. Again, thank you all, and we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.